The diner was quiet except for the clatter of plates and the low hum of a television in the corner. A man in a worn jacket sat at the edge of a booth, his broad shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed not on the menu but on the group of children seated across from him. They weren't his kids, not by blood, but the way his eyes softened, you'd think he had raised them himself. The waitress set down a single plate of food, scrambled eggs, toast, and a side of bacon. The children watched hungrily, their small hands folded together as though waiting for permission. The man smiled, breaking the toast in half and pushing the plate toward them. "Eat up," he said, his voice firm but warm. "I'm not hungry." But the truth was, he hadn't eaten a full meal in days. This man was John Miller, a decorated veteran who had served 2 tours overseas. When he came back, medals and handshakes didn't fill his pantry or keep the lights on. Jobs were scarce, and though he picked up shifts wherever he could, construction, security, even washing dishes, life had dealt him a cruel hand. His wife had passed away from an illness years earlier, and though he had no children of his own, he often found himself looking after neighborhood kids whose parents worked long hours. That night at the diner, the children were not even his responsibility. They were the children of his late army buddy, a man who had saved John's life but never made it back home. Their mother was struggling to make ends meet, so John did what came naturally. He sacrificed. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed. She had seen veterans come through before, some bitter, some broken. But John carried himself differently. Even in his worn clothes, he carried the quiet dignity of someone who had fought battles most people could never imagine. She wanted to say something, maybe offer him a free meal, but he shook his head when she tried. Pride wouldn't let him take charity. "As long as the kids are fed," he said softly, "that's all that matters." What John didn't know was that someone else had been watching. In the far corner of the diner, a woman in an elegant suit sat with her laptop open. She looked completely out of place in the Greasy Spoon restaurant, her diamond earrings catching the dim light, her manicured nails typing swiftly on the keys. Her name was Evelyn Hart, a billionaire entrepreneur whose face often appeared on magazine covers and television interviews. She had slipped into the diner unnoticed, seeking a break from her high-rise world of board meetings and investors. What she witnessed that night stopped her cold. Evelyn watched the way John gave up his food without hesitation, the way he reassured the children with gentle words, the way his hands, calloused and scarred, cut the bacon into pieces small enough for the youngest to chew. She had seen people throw money around, boast about their generosity at charity galas, but never something so raw, so selfless, so human. It shook her. She couldn't shake the image from her mind as she left a large tip for the waitress and quietly slipped out before John noticed her presence. The next morning, John's day began like any other. He woke in his small, drafty apartment, the morning sun creeping through the blinds. His fridge was nearly empty. Save for a half-empty carton of milk and a few eggs, he sighed, pulling on his boots, ready to take whatever odd job the day offered. But just as he reached for the doorknob, there was a knock. A firm, deliberate knock that echoed through the quiet apartment. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing there was Evelyn Hart, not in her polished business suit, but in a simple blouse and jeans, her hair tied back. She looked nothing like the billionaire splashed across the covers of Forbes or the Wall Street Journal. In her hands, she held 2 large grocery bags. "Mr. Miller," she asked, her voice steady but warm. John blinked in confusion. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," she said with a small smile. "But I know you." She stepped past him into the apartment, setting the bags on his tiny kitchen counter. They were filled to the brim with fresh produce, meat, bread, milk, more food than his fridge had seen in months. John stood stunned, unsure whether to feel grateful or suspicious. "What's all this?" he asked finally. "I saw what you did last night," Evelyn said, "at the diner. Giving up your meal for those kids. You didn't know anyone was watching, but I was, and it changed me." And John shifted uncomfortably, his pride warring with his need. "I don't want charity," he said firmly. Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't charity. It's gratitude. People like you, you've given more to this country, to people like me, than we could ever repay. And last night, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what true generosity looks like." Over the next few weeks, Evelyn returned. Not with handouts, but with opportunities. She connected John to a veterans program that offered steady employment, not just odd jobs. She introduced him to people who valued his leadership and discipline. Slowly, John's life began to change. His fridge stayed full, his bills stopped piling up, and for the first time in years, he could breathe without the weight of constant struggle pressing on his chest. But more than that, something unexpected blossomed between John and Evelyn. At first, it was just friendship, late-night conversations about the meaning of sacrifice, about what it felt like to lose and to rebuild. John shared stories of his time overseas, of the brotherhood and the heartbreak. Evelyn opened up about her loneliness, about how wealth had given her everything except the one thing she craved: connection. The children noticed it first. "You smile more when she's around," one of them teased. John laughed, brushing it off, but deep down he knew it was true. Evelyn had brought light back into a life that had been defined by shadows for too long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn stood in John's kitchen, helping him prepare dinner. She looked around the modest space, at the photographs of his army unit, at the drawings the neighborhood kids had left behind, and she said softly, "You know, John, you think you sacrificed your meal that night, but what you really did was feed something bigger. You reminded me that even in a world obsessed with money, the richest people are those who give without expecting anything in return." The John swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. He had fought wars, buried friends, endured hunger and loneliness. But in that moment, with Evelyn by his side, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. The story of a single dad veteran and a female billionaire spread quietly at first, through the diner staff, through the children's mother, through whispers in the community. But soon it became something more. Local papers picked it up, then national outlets. People were moved not by the wealth or the titles, but by the simple truth at the heart of it all: kindness has the power to change lives. And so from one small act of sacrifice in a diner, a chain of miracles unfolded, feeding not just empty stomachs, but hungry hearts. Because sometimes the greatest wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you're willing to give away.